Good morning, Africa. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, world. It's yet another day to be thankful and grateful for all of God's beautiful blessings. Welcome to Rise and Shine. It's the Friday edition. Of course, it's the first Friday in the month of August. And then for those in the Christian fold, I know a lot of people are talking about fasting and prayers today to kickstart the month. But I know other people are going to be celebrating at the club later on this evening, the very first of its kind.
The TGIF kinda.
Yeah, that's beside the fact that people within the hospitality industry are not having it good this time because of the way the economy of the country is across the respective state. We're seeing businesses gradually fading out, but we do hope that light will shine on Nigerians pretty very fast so that we don't get to a very terrible corner. My name is Francis Oyima Hedet, and of course I have the adorable.
Is you introducing me for me? Hello, Africa. Hello, Nigeria. Good morning, Akwa Ibom State. It's a beautiful Friday morning. I literally feel like even a sigh of relief. But I don't know if that is, if there is a view of any rest inside. But then, I'm thankful to be alive, thankful to be here this morning. It's a good day to, give thanks. Like Francis said, it's already the first Friday in the month of August. The month is gradually going. How is Nigeria on your end, and what is happening? Of course, one way that you can quickly answer that question is if you go to our social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtv.ng. Let's get the conversation going. But of course, Friday morning, last working day, last official working day. Of course, people still make millions on Saturdays and on Sundays, but officially business closes on Friday, and a lot is happening in the country.
Well, a lot is definitely happening in the country, and of course, one of those things is still about the industrial action embarked upon by the NLC, TUC, and indeed Nigerians. Of course, we're starting off with report that barely 24 hours after meeting with President Bola Tinubu, where an agreement was reached to call off their protest, the rapprochement between the organized labor and the federal government appeared to have collapsed, as the union yesterday vowed to embark on a nationwide strike from August 15th if their leaders were summoned for contempt of court orders. The Nigeria Labour Congress hinged its decision on the contempt of court application filed by the Federal Ministry of Justice against the Labour leaders on Wednesday. It threatened to down toll should the federal government fail to withdraw the lawsuit, accusing the Labour leadership of disobeying court orders. The NLC President Joe Ajero announced the decision yesterday night after the union's National Executive Council meeting, which was held in Abuja. Now, in a bid to avert a strike by the labor movement last month, you would recall that the federal government had, through the Federal Ministry of Justice, secured an order from the National Industrial Court restraining the NLC and the Trade Union Congress from embarking on any strike action over issues bordering on removal of fuel subsidy, hike in prices of petrol, and consequential increase in the cost of living, pending the determination of the suit. The Solicitor General of the Federation and Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Justice, Beatrice Jedi Agba, in a statement urged the NLC as a dan to withdraw the 7-day notice it issued on its plan to commence a nationwide industrial action from August 2nd if the demands of labor unions were not met. Of course, the Justice Ministry had then warned in a statement on July 26 that a planned strike by the union would be contempt of court, an offense that is punishable by imprisonment, according to the federal government. Of course, this is a developing story. We saw these battering going back and forth. We saw the likes of Falana, the human rights activist, speaking against the decision of the federal government and the comments coming out from the federal government as far as the planned industrial action was concerned. But there is a twist, because as far as the labor union is concerned, as far as the trade congress is concerned, it wasn't a strike that was embarked upon on Wednesday. It was a peaceful protest to drive home the point that Nigerians are suffering, Nigerians are having it hard. And it doesn't need a soothsayer in this country or outside the shores of this country to know that at this point in time, any government that is sensitive to the plights of its people, any government that prioritizes people-centered, leadership and governance would have known better than to go to the court to try and muzzle, the people. And I think this contradicts the standpoint of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, who has said, politicians and people in position of power should not talk down on Nigerians. If you're saying don't talk down on Nigerians, you're pledging to lead a country where there is accountability and transparency, where the Aso Rock Villa is open more to Nigerians to encourage people to trust in government. And yet we're seeing the federal government going against the NLC, TUC, and indeed all Nigerians, because the people said it is enough. We have suffered way too long. 60 days after fuel subsidy removal, 60 days after the president said he was ready to lead the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and then in his first inaugural speech, he declared the end of, fuel subsidy. 60 days after, there is no palliative in sight. Nigerians are not having it easy. Don't forget that we're just coming out of the cash crunch that happened just before the election. So it's like moving from one heat to another, moving from frying pan to fire. And one would have expected that if Ahmed Bola Tinubu truly cares about Nigerians like he claims, at this point, the option of going to the court, the options of dragging shouldn't even be on the table. The one solution out should have been to find way to, proffer solutions to the challenges Nigerians are facing, which of course will make Labour and TUC and Nigerians down tools for whatever planned protests might have been undergoing.
The issue is that oftentimes it looks like the leaders just want to try Nigerians and see what's going to happen. Because like I said yesterday, at what point, who exactly is filing this contempt suit against the NLC and the TUC at this time? Because I mean, you could see that the protest was largely peaceful nationwide. Plus the fact that at the end of that day, they had an emergency meeting with the president. If the president and the presidency was really disgruntled with the protest that held, why did the president grant the NLC TUC leadership, audience to have that meeting yesterday? Just to come out from the meeting and you're hearing that you've been served the court order saying that, you acted in contempt of court. We really need to, get the judiciary to explain where exactly they want us to head as a nation in terms of the constitution and the laws and orders in this country. We are also concerned, is it that people are able to just will some section of the constitution whenever they so please, use it, interpret it in a way that suits whatever you want to get done? I mean, Femi Falana continued to insist, and so many other people, the fact that peaceful protests are lawful. They are within the confines of the constitution. And I mean, we also saw the Nigeria Police Force come out to maintain peace and order in the nation whilst this protest was going on. So at what point, was there really a breach? Now we are seeing, members of this labor union saying that if this, injunction is not withdrawn from the, from the 14th of August, they are going to, go on a strike. I remember, having a conversation with someone, I think maybe 3 or 4 days back. And I asked the NLC chairman in Akwa Ibom State, Sonny James, I said, is this a protest or is this a strike action? He clarified saying it was a protest and nothing of a strike. Do you understand? Because I'm like, even when you look up those two words, they mean two different things, So it was just a protest. Where is the court subsisting order coming from? And why are we trying to drag us backward? We are looking for how to even, yesterday, of course, the NLC TUC were in an NEC meeting just to evaluate the things and the conversations that they had with the president. And here we are, having a different conversation altogether. We do hope that, the minders of the system from the presidency to the judiciary at this point will retract this particular move that they're making. Yes, agreed. Even as part of the motions that was raised, I think it was in the National Assembly early on this week, by one of the speakers. We cannot have a strike at this point because it will also collectively further cripple the economy of the country. We are already in a sore spot. If we have more incessant strikes, coming off just because somebody will not come to the table and negotiate with the next person, we are further crippling the economy. Everyone is literally struggling, in terms of economy, finding goods and services. You talked about the fact that the hospitality sector is something else, because how much is everything now that you just want to spend money and chilling out?
Don't forget, the Nigerian breweries have issued a statement. They are going to, increase the prices of drinks. So you can imagine how that is going to be for, night lovers and club goers
do you understand?
and the hospitality industry. So it's going to be a whole different hardship level on the sides of Nigerians. So
it's a major issue.
It's a major issue. At this point, Ahmed Bola Tinubu, as the president, needs to step in and show that he's not a ruler. He's not the Jagaban. He's not the whatever people think he is or whatever has been posited about his personality, but that he's a true Nigerian. I recall what he said when he took the oath of office to save Nigeria. He swore that he's going to serve Nigeria to the best of his abilities, and the interest of the Nigerian people is going to always be the top priority on this list. So at this point in time, if we are to place the interests of Nigerians, what are the Nigerian people asking for? You've removed fuel subsidy. Yes. We've said fuel subsidy is good. You've told Nigerians 1 trillion naira has been saved in the last 2 months as a result of that. Okay, very good, commendable. But what measures are you putting in place immediately to address the hardship occasioned by fuel subsidy removal? That is the first thing Nigerians are asking. In the long run, what measures are you putting in place to ensure that the problem in the petroleum sector is addressed holistically? That's the second question. And if you're able to provide solutions to these two big questions Nigerians are asking at this point, the NLC, TUC, Nigerians will not go on break. But then, bringing out the law court, bring out a court suit trying to muzzle the Nigerian people, because at this point it's not just about the Labour Congress. It's not just about the trade union organizations. It's about Nigerians. And whatever you do to those two unions, you are doing it to the generality of Nigerians. And let's not forget, let the federal government not also forget, that with or without the NLC, Nigerians can take to the streets. It wasn't the NLC that organized the NSAS protests. It was Nigerians. So when you think you can muzzle the entire country because of whatever instance you have, by taking away these two persons, you're opening up the floor for a lot worse scenario to play out.
A lot more disorganized, protest
to happen. Because NLC TUC was organized. We saw what happened across the respective state that took part in the protest. So if you take away the two persons who are more organized, the two figures who would help the people be a lot more organized, you are creating space for miscreants to take over the protest. And when that happens, let's not forget in a hurry what Nigerians had said after the NSAS protest tragedy. It is not going to be protest as usual. It is going to be protest in preparation for whatever military might the federal government would mold up. And let's not also forget that the ammunitions or light weapons in the hands of Nigerians is massive. We don't want to get to that point where it becomes too dicey for either the federal government or the Nigerian people. We want to get out of this economic, meltdown.
Well, we do hope that the presidency and the courts will move accordingly to retract this particular law. Of course, we are sure that the NLC TUC legal team also will be looking into this to address it so that we, avert any impending strike on the 14th of August. But let's move. Of course, as part of some of the things that the NLC and TUC asked for while they protested was the fact that modular refineries needed to be built. The defunct ones in the country, needed to be revamped and reactivated so that production and refining of crude oil can, start or continue in the country. We also saw the president come out to say that by December, the Port Harcourt refinery will be working. But of course, I know that most Nigerians are privy to the fact that these refineries, the 4 refineries that we have in Nigeria that are currently not refining any crude oil, usually get a quotation of money yearly for maintenance and payment of salaries for people who work there. Hence, the fact that we now see that the House of Representatives has called for a probe of 11.3 trillion naira. Now, of course, we see the House of Representatives announcing its plan to review the alleged 11.3 trillion expenditure by the federal government on Nigeria's refineries turnaround maintenance between 2010 and 2020. Now, Rep. Bamidele Salam, chairman of the House Committee on Public Accounts, revealed this during a press briefing in Abuja yesterday. Now, the aim is to address the increasing cost of petroleum products due to fuel subsidy removal. Salam expressed concern over the deplorable state of Nigeria's refineries despite the significant amount of money spent on their maintenance over the past decade. Now, he emphasized that the era of squandering public funds on unproductive projects without consequences will soon come to an end. Now, the committee also plans to conduct a thorough examination of the federal government's accounts and those of the MDAs to uncover wastage, inefficiency, and corruption in the public sector. Now, whilst being optimistic about President Bola Tinubu's administration's efforts to revitalize the Nigerian economy, Salam stressed the importance of ensuring value for money in all public contracts and adherence to existing laws and regulations regarding budgeting, procurement, and job certification. Now, of course, he highlighted the sad state of many roads, bridges, and public infrastructure that have become dilapidated despite significant budget allocations in previous years. Now, Salam is also raising concerns about contractors abandoning projects after receiving full pay. Of course, there's a myriad of things that he raised as concerns here. Now, he said with regards to recent increase in public revenue due to removal of subsidy and a merger of foreign exchange trading windows, he emphasized that these efforts would only have a positive impact if the government tackles wastage and strengthens its audit institution. Now, the basic issue here is that there is an alleged 11.3 trillion naira that has been spent between 2010 and 2020. That's a window of 10 years to sustain these refineries. Now, Salam is saying if this amount of monies have been sunk into the refineries, one, why are they not operational? Why are we not refining? Why are we not distributing crude fuel commodity within the country? He's also saying we have a lot of waste channels because we keep on voting these things, putting monies aside for it in every budget, but then it's not working. Yes, it is. It's time that someone actually ask these questions. And the only other problem is that even when we have a few good heads within the National Assembly of the House of Reps asking these questions, we do not have so many more people, putting the energy. And yes, committees will be set up, but how many intels and reports brought in by committees set up within the assemblies are usually followed up to bring a concise solution to the issues? 11.3 trillion naira is a lot of money, and we are still talking about the fact that okay, one trillion has been saved within one month of taking off subsidy. Where are you going to take this 1 trillion naira? If we take all this money, couldn't we have had at least 1 or 2 refineries even working within the country? And so I think that this question that has been thrown up by this reps member is a good question at this time, but are we going to receive the requisite answers to see the kind of change that we want? And again, the promise to have the Port Harcourt refinery up by December, is it just a cliche promise, or is our hands really going to be put on deck to make sure that this becomes a reality for the country by the end of this year?
Well, it's a big question that we just would need to wait and see if we will see a difference in the Ahmed Bola Tinubu's administration. But way back in 2021, we were told that 26.5 billion US dollars has been spent on maintenance costs. And of course, it was posited that this is enough to have built Nigeria 3 new refineries. Now, if we put the different costs that has been spent on year in, year out, in June of 2023, the immediate outgone administration said President Buhari spent over 19 billion on fixing refineries in 8 years. We also saw that 25 billion was also used in the same direction. So first and foremost, there have been conflicting figures from the immediate past administration on how much has been used to fix the refineries. You're hearing today 26.5 billion, you're hearing 19 billion, you're hearing 25 billion. So you ask first and foremost, exactly how much has been budgeted for the fixing of the Nigerian refineries over the years? Exactly how much? That's the first question. Let's even get to know, in the years, every year that we have it, budgeted for, what is the sum total of the amount of money budgeted to fix the refineries? In reality, how much has that done to the refineries?
Yes, because that's the question. When you say a refinery is being maintained, what exactly do you mean? What is done, with all these monies at this refinery? We are meant to see some form of change. The NNPCL is saying that contracts to maintain the Kaduna and Warri refineries cost about 1.4 billion US dollars, while that of the Port Harcourt cost around now in total we have about 2.7 billion US dollars were awarded for the repair of Nigeria's 4 refineries. So 2.7 billion dollars. Couldn't it have given us all these refineries to be working in the country? I think I was having a conversation with someone just yesterday, asking, when we throw up questions on our social media and we are asking, what are your thoughts with certain things that Nigerians are doing or Africa. Someone reached me, I was reading on one of our comment sessions. The person said Africa is not ready for democracy. We should just go back to our monarchical system of government where we had kings and, our rulers exert the kinds of, order that we had back in the day before we decided to do democracy. Because what amount of greed and dishonesty and the lack of transparency are we having that 2.7 billion US dollars, not naira, has not been able to fix us even one refinery over the years? So we just have people elected into offices who find, conduit pipes through contracts and other things to milk the country of taxpayers' money. Why not collectively do something good for the country to benefit from, instead of just, you vote 2.7 billion. 1.7 billion has gone into the pockets of other people, and then the abysmal change is now used to do one or two things, pay salaries around the refinery for all of these years. Big question. Why are you maintaining refineries 4 across the country for 10 years without gaining? We're talking business here. When you make investments, you expect returns on these investments. So how could you have invested 2.7 billion US dollars across the years that they have been contracted, and we cannot account of any kinds of profits made on those investments? Why then are we still voting money for the maintenance? Of course, all of this needs to be, evaluated.
Well, first, it's a good thing that we have the National Assembly. We have somebody asking the right question. But like you rightly stated in the first instance, it is not enough for a member of parliament in the National Assembly to actually raise that question. If we have to go down the history of forensic auditing, history of investigation, history of ad hoc committees being set up to probe and investigate different revenue leakages, different mismanagement of public funds, the outcome of it has never been one the Nigerians would say, yes, for the first time we've seen the government of the day actually probing, investigating. We've seen people being punished. We've seen monies being returned that was looted through XYZ investigations and ad hoc committees set up to investigate those matters. So at this point in time, if we are ever going to get past the problem of corruption that, of course, Ahmed Bola Tinubu seems to also take under his cause as one of the things he wants to fight against. Recalled in his speech on Monday, he did say the money from fuel subsidy that has been, saved would have gone into the pockets of some criminal elements who are holding the country to ransom at this point. But if Ahmed Bola Tinubu really wants Nigerians to trust in his ability, to trust in his government, then we need to get past just mouth talks in terms of corruption. Let us not just set up ad hoc committees. Let us just not probe and investigate. Let's get to see publications about who has been found wanting, who has been found guilty. Take these people before the law court. Let the court, make its verdict, and let these people serve out their sentences. return the money that was stolen to the public funds and let these monies be channeled to do things that Nigerians would see. Now, if we've been told that, the over 26 billion US dollars could build Nigeria another refinery, that means we have been sitting down, wasting opportunities to get a lot more refineries established, getting the already existing ones functional, being able to recruit our own crude oil here in our very own country. Yeah. That means we are also taking away, in the last 10 years, thousands of job opportunities that would have been available for Nigerians. We are taking away businesses that would have come down to Nigeria because of the raw materials, other raw materials that would have come as a result of us refining our crude oil. So all of these conversations cannot hold water. All of these conversations cannot lead Nigeria anywhere unless we see people being punished for stealing from the public treasury.
I think, again, Nigerians are pampering those they elect into office. Because if we constitute a system of holding our leaders accountable, asking them, okay, XYZ budget, if we have Nigerians who sit over the budget of this country and the different allocations made into different ministries and parastatals, you go, you ask questions, this money, it was quoted for this, what did you use it to do? If we have, Nigerians who become this deliberate with asking this kind of questions, very soon our leaders will stop taking Nigerians for granted, because it just means that, everybody's like, yeah, whatever you so, please do. Do you understand? Nigerians are pampering our leaders. We are not asking questions. The probes are not enough. Whose leadership brought up whistleblowing? It was former President Muhammadu Buhari. We are not blowing enough whistles, with things happening in this country. Like you said, 2.7 billion will build us refineries all around this country, but we are trying to maintain 4 defunct refineries that are not even working with that amount of money. So yes, we need to do better. We need to ask more questions. And like I said, I hope that this does not die at the point of this motion being raised at the House of Reps. We do hope that there are more people in this 10th Assembly that are willing to serve this country than keep gloating about the fact that their pay as lawmakers are not even enough. We need to go beyond some of this kind of selfishness and get this country working. I was reading the news content yesterday and they're saying, Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, and I'm saying, this economy, how large are we indeed? We have a lot of promise as a nation, but we are not living up to those things. And it's high time Nigeria begins to work. But then again, still talking about Nigeria working, earlier we talked about strikes. Now, the National Association of Resident Doctors, I think a week ago, had said they were going on a strike because they have tried negotiating with the federal government to come to their aid with regards to certain welfares. There are certain arrears that are being owed members of the union and other things. But now we see, and there is a slight game where we see the federal government trying to use some instrumentality of the state against its people. Now, of course, we've also seen the federal government moving to implement a no work, no pay for resident doctors. The federal government directed the chief medical directors and medical directors in the federal tertiary hospitals to implement the no work, no pay policy on the striking members of the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. Now, the federal government also directed the hospitals to maintain an attendance register for all resident doctors willing to work. Now, the letter obtained by the letter which was obtained by newsmen showed that the Federal Ministry of Health to the CMDs and MDs of all the FTHs in the country. Now, the letter dated August 1, 2023 was titled Incessant Strike Action by the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. Now, of course, it says doctors' implementation of no work, no pay policy of the federal government was signed by the Director of Hospital Services, Dr. Andrew Noah. Now, NARD embarked on an indefinite strike on July 26, 2023 to press home certain demands. Now, the strike followed the expiration of a 2-week ultimatum to the government to meet their demands. The doctors are demanding the implementation of the 1-for-1 replacement policy for the healthcare workers as a result of the Japa syndrome that has hit the sector. We also see them requesting the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria to discontinue the downgrading of the membership certificate issued by the West African Postgraduate Medical and Surgical Colleges. They're also asking the immediate payment of all salary arrears, the implementation of the consolidated medical salary structure, a new hazard allowance, and the domestication of the Medical Residency Training Act, among others. Now, of course, the government is accusing the striking doctors of being insensitive. Of course, there have been various conciliatory meetings by the Federal Ministry of Health, Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment with government stakeholders. Secretary to the government of the Federation and the National Assembly have proved abortive. Of course, now there is a move to say no work, no pay. As I'm going through this background, I'm remembering something in the Holy Book that says that a laborer is worthy of its wages. Now, when we look at, some of the kinds of demands that different sectors have, let's talk about the doctors. When we had the epidemic of COVID-19 hitting the world, they are at the front line of receiving these hazards. What will it take you to pay these doctors their hazard fees? They're exposed. While the rest of the world, were locked in behind their, locked in their houses, these people had to come out and be interfaced, with this epidemic. Is it so difficult to ask that hazard fees should be paid? Why not look at the best way possible to make sure that the system is lubricated so that it can go on favorably for everyone? And so it now looks like we are finding a way to demonize the whole structure of strikes and all of that. Let's not even forget that even in developed worlds and developing nations, different sectors of the economy, once things are not working for them, they down tools after going on, several negotiations. And now they're saying we have attempted to have a lot of negotiations with the federal government, but after MOUs are signed, usually that's all they get to hear. And these promises are never effected.
Well, right now, talking about strike, you know that outside the shores of Nigeria, the film industry abroad is not working because of an issue that is being raised and concerns that hasn't been met over time, and negotiations have failed consistently. That's in civil societies, that is in saner climes. And people would expect, the world would expect that Nigeria is actually a civil society, that Nigeria is actually developed enough to a point of having right-thinking people at the helms of affairs. What the Nigerian government seems not to understand about what is happening is first that their incessant conjuring of the powers of the state to muzzle the people is well noticed by the international communities, and it's painting the wrong image of the country and its leaders. That's aside. Hazard allowance, let me come from that point first. A lot of hospitals around, if we look at for instance, a common thing as, let me not even say a common thing, something like HIV, one of the easiest way to get it is through needle breaks. And doctors deal with needles, nurses deal with needles. So if you're talking about the risks involved in taking care of a sick person, in being there to care for a sick person, is like times 20 of the risks any other person can go through. So do these people deserve the hazard allowances they're asking? Yes, of course they do. They even deserve it more than the legislators who get sitting allowances. I mean, I was watching the plenary this week, and it's laughable that when other senators, House of Rep members are standing up to make, move motions, you will find a legislator laughing, just sitting down, laughing on national TV or sleeping away. And yet this group of persons get sitting allowance. Is it sitting allowance or sleeping allowance? Maybe we should refresh it to sleeping allowance, so that Nigerians will know that we are paying people to go to the National Assembly and sleep through the months of their stay in the National Assembly without making one contribution. And yet they are being paid millions of naira for what? Sitting allowances, sleeping allowances, going to the National Assembly without saying absolutely nothing, without contributing even one motion to uplift Nigerians. So if this group of persons are being given their allowances as at when due, the doctors deserve a lot more commitment on the part of government to ensure that their allowances, their emoluments are paid as at when due. I mean, these people wouldn't need to go on strike. Now, let's say you didn't pay attention to this, and now they're on strike. You're saying no work, no pay. at whose detriment? We all know that when the politicians are sick, they travel outside the shores of Nigeria. So it still goes down to show the insensitivity on the part of our leaders, because they know he doesn't touch me. If I'm sick, if my family member is sick, I just need to fly the person abroad. So it comes down to the Nigerian people who are the ones suffering now that the hospitals are on strike. It is the common man in the street. Who is going to suffer in the long run when you effect a no pay, a no job, no pay, and the doctor says, okay, no problem.
And even when we get the services from like private hospitals, you know that, you know, the financial demand
is going to be different.
It's going to be different. So the common man cannot even just have, you know, an issue and run into these hospitals. It's just a back and forth that is really unacceptable at this time. The rate at which we are seeing the instrumentality of the state being used against its workers or its people, like you said, it's an insensitive line. You're seeing how this first of all affects Nigerians, but for some I think we're having this conversation somewhere, and for some reason we are looking at the fact that the federal government is trying to save money, but at the expense of Nigerians, not at the expense of the waste that they incur, you know, for governance. There are other, you know, vital areas where you can look at and nib in the bud that is, you know, helping us waste resources in this country. But no, every time you think of saving money or saving resources, you go first to the workers. We've explained over and over how some of these salary increments as requested by NLC, TUC, and you know, NAD, for instance, now are unattainable. You keep saying, oh, it's not realistic. How can you ask that the federal government should, you know, increase salaries, minimum wage by 300%? From what, you know, every senator and every house member earns as, you know, salaries and sitting allowance, if you take off it, will we really not be able to sustain these requests, you know, made to a very large extent? It might not be 100%, but if we come, I like to say, let the government and the people meet halfway. You know, we have that argument that government cannot do everything, but government should also not do nothing, you know, at this point. But we see, of course, reacting to this particular letter that was sent to the National Association of Resident Doctors, the Secretary General, Dr. Kelechi Chikezie, said the directive coming from the federal government was not unexpected. That's something else that the federal government must know. When unions say they want to take a particular action, you do not expect that some of these very learned professional bodies will not think through what, you know, are the pros and cons of all of this. You should be sure that they've thought it through, because it's our politicians that look like they don't think things through before they do it, you know. So of course they said, you know, they had expected this, and now they have seen the letter and will meet as leaders of NAD to take a position on this particular letter. But now the policy is not new to us, and we would not say we were not expecting it. So this is a stand. They intend to go into a meeting and come out and tell the federal government whether or not they're going to continue with the strike. But Francis, we also look at the fact that when you say no work, no pay, most Nigerians are going to be looking at the fact that if we do no work, no pay, where are we going to even earn the peanuts we are earning to be able to sustain ourselves and our families in the face of biting, you know, economy? The federal government has said, let registers be put in hospitals. Those that are willing to come and work should work and pen down their names. At the end of the month, they'll be paid salaries. You now begin to see the kind of division that we saw, you know, in ASU, where all of a sudden the federal government instituted, you know, by the labor, and we now have, is it CONWA and, you know, the other bodies belt, you know, taken out of ASU. These are problems, and we now we are driving as the federal government divisive forces within the unions.
Well, it's a divide and rule tactics employed by the federal government. It's a way of breaking the strength of the different labor unions. But divide and rule has its down point. It has its downturn, because the same leaders you are using today will turn against you, because they know they might be your favorite pet cat today. They might be your favorite doll today. But what happens when they fall out of favor with you tomorrow? It is definitely going to not be the way it is supposed to be. Now, let's even come down to the no work, no pay. One of the things that happened during the last ASU strike was the fact that lecturers had learned to survive without their salary. Now, let's not forget that practically there is literally nobody in this country with the preaching for multiple streams of income who doesn't have one or two things they are doing to gain an extra money. It will get to a point in Nigeria where when the federal government says no work, no pay, everybody shuts down. Everywhere is shut down. And probably at that point, it would be too late for the federal government to understand that Nigerians have had enough of sacrificing at the detriment of themselves, while we have people at the helms of affairs eating fat and not doing anything to also make the same sacrifice that they are preaching to Nigerians. So at this point, any leader who has the interest of Nigeria, from the National Assembly to the presidency to the state government, it is time for us to quit the talk. It is time to do the actions that will put Nigerians and the leaders at one center where we all can agree. When we get to that point, then a generality of Nigerians will know that Ahmed Bola Tinubu, the president, is really, really, really looking forward to transforming Nigeria because of these actions. But if we don't get to see those actions, it means all the President Ahmed Bola Tinubu has been saying is just mere talk. When we get past mere talks and see actions, then there will be a difference and there will be a change. But moving away from that, the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, has said that part of the things that INEC, the commission, is doing is to review what happened during the just concluded elections. Now, the commission's administrative secretaries met in Lagos State to review the 2023 general elections. The INEC chairman said the meeting was to identify some of the administrative issues that affected INEC's performance in the last general elections. The meeting, he said, is to identify the areas of strength with a view to consolidating where necessary. The meeting also seeks to identify the weaknesses in order to come up with actionable recommendations for improvement in future elections. Now, I love this particular meeting because if you look at administration during the just concluded elections, let's look at registration of the media houses. I'll start from there. We had a lot of media houses that were not given accreditation, even when they had registered through the... First was the fact that the portal was not even responding. So we had a malfunctioning portal given to media houses for registration that you would spend days before you are able to register. Eventually, after being able to register, media tax were not generated for those media houses. At the 11th hour, INEC now had to decide to do manual accreditation after putting the media houses through the stress for weeks. That's one area. Let's come down to logistics. Where I covered in Akwa Ibom State, for instance, when INEC had told us that between the hours of 8, we will find election processes kickstarting in their respective level, you would discover that as at 10 o'clock, the admin officers in the respective sub-outlets of INEC offices across the respective local government area were still trying to distribute election materials. So you find that by 12 p.m. is when people even get out to their polling units, or INEC agents get to their polling units. That's not ruling out the fact that there were areas that you find people going there on time for the election processes to happen. So Nigerians would expect that this review would be holistic enough to look at the inadequacies of INEC officials, the inadequacies of the systems set up by INEC, and then address these inadequacies holistically. Another thing is the fact that within the course of the elections, it seems some states of the Federation, the resident electoral commissioners will receive sensitive materials without necessarily bringing in the media for coverage, except a few that are maybe by luck happens to stumble on the information and stop by. So all of these concerns are things that the INEC body needs to consider while reviewing the challenges that were visible during that election period.
Well, there's a lot to review, because I know that the just concluded cycle of election is one that Nigerians won't forget in a hurry. And if Professor Mahmood Yakubu is bringing his team together to do this particular review, I think it is pertinent, especially because come November, we still have by-elections to be conducted in 4 states. We do hope that, we will be able to see, some good really done in these forthcoming elections. Not that we have a lot of, repeated failures from the last elections. But then again, the big question is, it looks like INEC succeeds when the elections are smaller than when it is nationwide, because remember that some of the discrepancies that we noticed during the general election, it was more like, oh, we succeeded in Osun State, we succeeded here, we used the Beavers machines, we used this, so everything is going to go smoothly. But when it came to the general elections, that wasn't the situation. And I knew that come November, a lot of Nigerians are going to be also really observing the conduct of INEC during that forthcoming by-election. So it's instructive for, INEC to come together to have this meeting. But the question will now be, is this meeting counterproductive to moving that particular agency forward? Remember that upon, all of the failures registered during and grievances registered during this election, even the reports from the international observers have asked that INEC should be overhauled. They have asked that a lot of, structural issues within the system should be checked if we want to succeed at our elections. What is the guarantee that the same set of people that gave us the mass failures that we saw can sit down by themselves and evaluate themselves and move, bring out suggestions that can move them forward as a sector, as an MDA at this time? So it's important that Professor Mahmood Yakubu finds a way to prove himself to Nigerians. And another big question will be, are Nigerians even interested in seeing what Mahmood Yakubu can do different at this time? So, but having them come together to review, and resolve the logistic problems that, we saw all over the elections in February and March, it will go a long way. And I do hope that we see returns. We have the next cycle of elections, general elections, in 4 years. We do hope that we are not taking our country, 5 steps forward and 10 steps backwards at this time.
Well, it is the hope of Nigerians, and the question, like you rightly asked, are Nigerians willing to hear and have Professor Mahmood to prove himself otherwise? That's a big question to ask, and most Nigerians would answer absolutely no. But should Nigerians give them a benefit of the doubt? A lot of people would advocate for that. Will they be able to holistically, honestly review the challenges, the weaknesses that was, very evident in the just concluded elections? That is a bit of a puzzle because we never can tell. But then if they can get past their personal ego and then get to look holistically, honestly and sincerely at the different challenges that was registered during the just concluded elections, then they might be able to proffer a solution. On the overhauling of INEC, that is a call that the leadership of this country cannot overlook if we want to strengthen our electoral institution. But this is where we're going to pause it out and, of course, head out to Mary Joseph, who's standing by to take us round what is happening through the news brief. When we come back, rise and shine. We'll continue. Stay with us.
Business exists. only to meet the needs of the people. But there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect
every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on channel 421 on StarTimes to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories and how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the Constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court, my lord.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
As of state and government, Secretary General, delegates.
Voting for Spectrum TV to recover for the lapses taken into account.
A very good morning to you and welcome to your morning news brief on Spectrum, live from Uyo. I am Mary Joseph. We begin the news brief with the report that President Bola Tinubu has dispatched a delegation led by a Nigerian diplomat, Babangana Kingibe, to engage with the leaders of Libya and Algeria on the crisis in Niger Republic, where a military junta overthrew democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum. This was as he sent another delegation headed by former Nigerian head of state General Salami Abubakar to Niger to speedily resolve the current political impasse in the country. Away from that, in line with the new tenure limits introduced for directors in the Federal Civil Service, the Federal Ministry of Finance has ordered that all its directors who have spent 8 years in the directorate adhere to tender their notice for early retirement. The directive was contained in a memo signed by the Director of Administration of the Ministry, Maria Raufa, dated August 3, 2023, addressed to all directors and head of units of the Ministry. Recall that the Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation on July 8, 2023 launched the newly revised Public Service Rule. We head straight to border security, where the Acting Inspector General of Police, Olukayode Egbetokun, has played host to the Acting Comptroller General, Nigerian Customs Service, Adewale Adeniyi, at the Louis Edet House Force Headquarters, Abuja. The meeting served as a platform for both agencies to seek ways to strengthen cooperation across all areas of the respective operations, especially border control. The Force Public Relations Officer Olumuyiwa Dejobi made this known in a statement on Thursday. So electoral matters now, where the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, has met with the Commission's administrative secretaries to review the 2023 general elections. Yakubu said the meeting was to identify some of the administrative issues that affect INEC's performances in the last general elections. We head straight now to the foreign scene, where Niger's ousted leader Mohamed Bazoum has urged the U.S. and the entire international community to help restore constitutional order after last week's coup. President Mohamed Bazoum said he was writing as a hostage. Recall that on Thursday, the coup leaders announced that they were withdrawing the country's ambassador from France, the U.S., Nigeria and Togo. Meanwhile, unrest has erupted in the West African states since Bazoum was overthrown. And finally, in sport, ahead of the round of 16 clash between Nigeria and England at the ongoing Women's World Cup, former Arsenal star Rachel Yankee has signaled a warning to the Lionesses. The 43-year-old warned that the Lionesses should be prepared for a tough knockout game with Nigeria, who she said played a different style of football. The two countries remained unbeaten so far at the Women's Football Showpiece in Australia and New Zealand. We'll have details of this and more in our news at 12. I am Mary Joseph. Let's head back to Rise and Shine, where we have Francis and Uyai on standby. Do have a wonderful morning.
Government, Secretary General, delegates.
Voting for Spectrum TV to recover from the lapses in counting.
grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the Constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my Lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My Lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My Lord, the Matters Council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my Lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court, my Lord.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my Lord. These cases are in court, my Lord. I'm just reminding your Lordship.
My Lord, sorry, my Lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Rise and Shine. Of course, this is the Friday edition, and we're coming to you live from the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. Mary Joseph just brought us tidbits of global news, and just before we went to the news brief, we've talked about several issues of national importance already on Rise and Shine. And first on our list this morning was the fact that federal government and labor talks have collapsed as we see the NLC threaten to go on a strike on the 14th of August if the federal government does not withdraw the court suit against the NLC and TUC leadership. We also saw the fact that House of Reps to probe 11.3 trillion naira alleged maintenance funds for the refineries in the country. We also talked about the fact that the federal government is making a move to implement no work, no pay on the National Association of Resident Doctors who have been striking since the 26th of July. Of course, great questions are being asked. Where exactly are we headed in the country using the instrumentality of the state against its people? We also see here that INEC Chairman Yakubu Mahmood was in a meeting yesterday with his admin staff to look at some of the logistic issues that they experienced during the February 25 and March 11 elections in the country. These and more are some of the conversations we've had so far on Rise and Shine. To catch up on all that, you need to follow us across all social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtv.ng. Subscribe to our YouTube, turn on the notification bell so that when we are live, just as we are now, you can get to have us on the go whilst you get about all the things of your day. But at this point, let's do a quick swipe at Daily Spotlight, where we bring you information from the front pages of the national dailies.
Well, on our daily spotlights this morning, we're kickstarting with the Punch newspaper. And the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning, the kicker says federal government labor talks collapse. NLC begins strike August 14. And the Rider Day says white labor made U-turn on agreement reached with Tinubu on subsidy removal. Man LCCI demand more palliatives from federal government. NLC gives reasons for ending protests. You can find that on page number 26 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Still on the front page, PDP LP mocks APC as NEC ratifies Ganduje party chairman. That's on page number 10 of the Punch newspaper. We also find the federal government begins no work, no pay for striking doctors. That's on page 7. New public service rules may force out 512 directors. That's on page 2. Niger, Tinubu woes Libya, Algeria against junta. Still on page 7 of the Punch newspaper. And of course, before we go, NNPCL, NIPCO begins deployment of autogas stations. That is on page number 18. Those are the major stories you find on the front page of the Punch newspaper.
Moving on from the Punch newspaper this morning, let's take a quick swipe at the Vanguard newspaper. Big story on the Vanguard this morning says contempt charge will go on indefinite strike August 14 if, of course, that's the NLC, gives August 11 deadline for withdrawal of summons. We'll face Nigeria's challenges squarely, says Tinubu. You can find details of all that on page 5 and page 43 respectively. We also have here coup. ECOWAS delegation meets with Niger's military leader. Of course, GSK group to shut down operations in Nigeria. Page 20 is where you can find the details of that. We also see here subsidy removal. NNPCL, NIPCO plan 35 CNG stations nationwide. Great news. Hopefully the implementation is done as soon as possible. Of course, page 8 is where you can find details of that story. MPR, banks raise interest rates on savings deposits. Page 19 is where we can find details. Where will the poor run into in this country? APC, how Ganduje emerged 6th national chair, Bashiru, secretary. Page 8. Troops kill 36 terrorists, rescue 140 kidnapped hostages nationwide. Page 6 is where we can find details. Diphtheria outbreak claims 122 lives in Nigeria, says UNICEF. Obaseki warns of crisis without remedial works on federal roads in Edo. Page 12 is where we can find details. In, of course, in sports, we have Women's World Cup. Beware of Nigeria. Yankee warns England. I do hope that that's a reality that will come to pass, and that's all that we have on the front page of the Vanguard.
Our next up is the Nigerian Tribune, and on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, the kicker there says, waiting game in APC as Ganduje Basiru emerged National Chairman. Secretary Hiari Edu Lukman's positions up for grabs. PDP mocks party over Ganduje's appointment. That's on page 5 of the Nigerian Tribune. Still on the front page, you see security agents intercept ship with suspected stolen crude oil in Delta. That's on page 27. Sultan Abdul Salami meet Niger leaders. Tinubu dispatches King Kibe-led team to Libya, Algeria. Atiku cautions on military force. No intervention order yet. DHQ clarifies. Those stories are on page 8 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. And of course, to wrap up the major stories there, we see that Oyo workers continue secretariat blockade, agitation unfair, don't get violent, government cautions. That's on page 27. Reps to revisit 11.3 trillion allegedly spent on turnaround maintenance of refineries. That's on page 12 of the Nigerian Tribune. And the last story there, NLC threatens strike if federal government fails to withdraw lawsuit. That's on page 23. And those are the major stories you find on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune.
Okay, quick swipe. Daily Times. Daily Times is what we're going next this morning. And Daily Times says disquiet in APC over Muslim dominance of sensitive posts. Great. We also see here as Ganduje Basiru emerged National Chairman and National Secretary. We have the 4 leading positions within the APC: President, Vice President, National Chairman, and Secretary, all Muslims. All right, Niger coup, former head of state Abubakar Abdul Salami arrives Niamey with Tinubu's delegation. We also see here that after over half a century in Nigeria, GlaxoSmithKline closes shop. Notorious foreign-linked Boko Haram ISWAP logistics collaborator nabbed in Northeast. Great news. Nigeria diaspora remittances to hit $26 billion amid mass migration. Page 9 is where you can find details, and that's all we have on the front page of Daily Times.
Our last stop this morning is the front page of the Nation newspaper, and we have the kicker there says Ganduje pledges reform fairness to reposition APC. The rider says former Governor Senator Basiru stepped in. Tinubu, let's fulfill our promises. NWC gets flat to fill 6 vacant posts. That's on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. NSA probes another vessel held with stolen crude. That's on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. And of course, the rider there says suspected military boat escorting ship. Still on the front page of the Nation newspaper, Tinubu sends Abdul Salami Sultan to warn Niger junta. King Kibe on diplomatic shuttle to Algeria, Libya. That is on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And the last story, of course, we have NNPCL and NIPCO to deploy 35 CNG stations. Oil gas free trade zones attract $16 billion investment. Those stories you can find on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And those are the major stories you find on the Nation this morning.
Literally everything that we have on the front pages of our national dailies. For you to catch up on all the details, feel free to pick up any copy of any of this, of course, national dailies. And in this day and time that everything is available online, you can also find details of the story online. Like I'd always like to say, it is important that we arm ourselves with information in this country. Do not be found under the, what is it, under the table now, but do not be found wanting with regards to information of things happening in Nigeria. That's the month we can take on Daily Spotlight this morning. Let's take a quick break. When we return this week, we are celebrating the world over, the World Breastfeeding Day. And like you know, Friday is our Lifestyle Friday. We like to talk about how you can help yourself amidst everything happening in the world and everything happening in the country. You remember that health is wealth. After this time, I will be joined with a guest and we'll be looking at certain important conversations around breastfeeding of our children. Do stay with us. When we return, Rise and Shine continues.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, of course, this is still Rise and Shine, and we are live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. Like it said earlier, the week, usually between the 1st and 7th of August globally, we celebrate World Breastfeeding Day. Some people may be asking, what is breastfeeding? I would like to ask you, weren't you breastfed when you were growing up? And why are we really talking about these issues? I'd like to say that 21st century life is really affecting some of the norms that families upheld, in time past. And this is why these kinds of conversations are very pivotal at this time. This morning, I'm being joined with two beautiful women to have this conversation. One person on set, the second person is joining me virtually to look holistically into what this week entails and what breastfeeding means and how much it impacts on the lives of newborns and growing children. Of course, I'm being joined by Celia Tev, nutrition advisor for Center for Clinical Care and Clinical Research Nigeria. Good morning, Celia. Good to have you on the show.
Good morning. Thank you.
Of course, I'd like to add that Celia is from Plateau. I loved the sound of that. Celia Tev, of course, joining us this morning. We also have Dr. Kuye Kemiekpo, consultant, public health physician, Department of Community Medicine, University of Uyo Teaching Hospital. Good morning, ma'am, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Oh, yeah. How is the city of Uyo on your end this morning?
It's a bright and beautiful morning over here, and we are happy to be alive to see today.
Thank you so much for joining us. All right, World Breastfeeding Day, of course, global campaign held between the 1st and the 7th of August every year. Why is there even a need for us to have a global conversation for an entire week to look into breastfeeding? And what angle does this come in from, clinical research and nutritional balance?
All right, thank you for the question. So globally, the world is celebrating the World Breastfeeding Week, and Nigeria has joined the rest of the world to celebrate the Breastfeeding Week. So the theme for 2023 is enabling breastfeeding and making breastfeeding work for working mothers, So it's a call and a wake-up call for everyone to support breastfeeding mothers at workplaces and ensure that they're able to be supported in the sense of breastfeeding their babies. They're provided with crèches at workplaces and lactation rooms where they can breastfeed the babies, because it's very important for babies to be breastfed immediately after delivery. The first 30 minutes to 1 hour after delivery is expected that the woman should put the baby to the breast. And it has a lot of importance and benefits for both the mother and the child. So we're talking about early initiation. That is when you introduce baby to breast milk within the first 30 minutes to 1 hour. And then the baby continues to breastfeed till when the baby gets to 6 months. And from that period, it's purely breastfeeding without addition of solids or any liquids. Purely
the first 6 months.
The first 6 months. Unless medically indicated, there could be some reasons why the baby will be introduced to other forms of feeding, like maybe the infant formula, but it should be medically indicated. So, but the standard, according to the infant and young child feeding, Nigeria is expected, and the world entirely is expected to observe the 6 months. So working mothers are to be supported at workplaces, which means if I have a baby and my organization should be able to provide me with a crèche or a lactation room where I can go and breastfeed the baby when the baby needs, because the babies, when the baby is well breastfed, it also serves as a good benefit to the organization because the mother's attention will not be distracted. At workplaces, she can take out like 2 hours just for breastfeeding, support the baby in the best way that the baby can, and that's part of the benefit. And so the baby won't be falling sick and she'll be running up and down from hospitals to hospitals, because breast milk has a lot of nutrients that is very essential for growth and development of the child. So during that period, the baby needs just the breast milk, because the breast milk contains all the nutrients required for that age, from 0 to 6 months.
I think one thing I like about this year's celebration is enabling, breastfeeding, making it, possible for working mothers. Because, like I said earlier in the introduction, the fact that the fast pace of life is really affecting even how children are raised these days. Dr. Epotu, I'm going to ask you now, from the medical perspective as a practicing medical doctor, when you talk about breastfeeding, what does this entail? And how often are you seeing women now who do not even want to breastfeed their children for whatever reasons this is now happening?
All right, so breastfeeding basically means, as the name goes, breastfeeding, putting the child to the breast. And not just putting the child to the breast, because you could also have expressed breast milk, which is being fed to the child. There's been a lot of campaign on breastfeeding for as long as far back as 1990, when the Innocenti Declaration came up, encouraging mothers not just to breastfeed, but to exclusively breastfeed. Because there's a difference between just breastfeeding and exclusively breastfeeding. And as the lady there had mentioned, she was very right. Exclusive breastfeeding is giving the child breast milk only, with no fluid, with no additional meals from birth till 6 months. And you will recognize that globally, we are yet to get to the 70% target. We are at 48%, though there have been a 10% increase in the rate of exclusive breastfeeding globally. And even within Nigeria, there's been a very minimal improvement. We still have a lot of work to do. And considering this young generation that is coming up, young mothers having babies, we at the hospital, we tend to see a lot of women that bring their children for immunization, already commencing other means of feeding, liquid, formula milk and stuff like that. And you try to ask them why, and the first thing they go is, oh, I've got to go to work. So that is why the theme of this year is so apt, is so important, because if you remember, last year's theme was something about families supporting breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So I think the World Health Organization is just moving from stage to stage, family support, and now let the workplace now do the supporting. Because even when family supports, you recognize that with the economy in the country and in the world globally, one has to put in some kind of work to survive and feed other children. So that woman can't stay at home forever to breastfeed. She's got to go to work. So the work environment has to be made to be something that she can continue breastfeeding her child, mostly exclusively if the maternity leave is not up to 6 months, like what's happening in our country right now. I think maternity leave is 16 weeks for public service. And you realize that she gets back to work earlier than 6 months. And that has been the main complaint, of mothers that bring their kids for immunization. The reason why they had to introduce some other feed to the child was because they had to resume work. So I think we have a whole lot of work to do in that aspect, both in the public and in the private sector.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Celia, what are the primary benefits of breastfeeding, a child? Why should I even bother about breastfeeding my child when there are, alternatives all over the market in this present day?
All right, thank you. So breast milk generally has a lot of benefits. Looking at the safety, you know, it's very clean, it's affordable. You don't pay to buy breast milk, but other advanced countries do because they have breast milk banks. You know, but
is that
Nigeria,
healthy to have breast milk
it is because it's stored under very good hygienic condition. But for Nigeria, we're far behind in terms of because our culture would not even allow some of us to get our milk from the milk bank. Yes, from the milk bank. So breast milk is safe. It saves you the cost of buying another option like infant formula, and then it's available at all times. You know, so it also has a lot of nutrients that are important for that child at that period of time. And it's safe because most of the times, you know, women prepare infant formula and comes with the hygiene practice, it's quite poor, and then it has some effect on the child. The child could have diarrhea and it could have other illnesses, you know, like pneumonia too, because children that are well breastfed have this bonding between them and the mother, and it keeps them warm because the mother keeps breastfeeding and then skin to skin with the child, and the child keeps warm. And it's very good, especially for children that are underweight or preterm babies, you know, because it keeps their temperature warm, and so it's so beneficial. And then to the family entirely, you know, funds that will be used to buy other things in the family, you know, funds for other sorts of feeding like infant formula can now be used for other needs in the home. They can use it for their school fees, for the feeding of the family, for other needs, generally medical and so on.
So I've heard both of you say this morning that it's important that a child is breastfed strictly on breast milk for at least the first
6 months.
Yeah, but is it possible that a parent would want to extend that extensive and exclusive breastfeeding beyond 6 months? If they do that, is that still healthy for a child?
Yeah, the standard, like I mentioned, we stopped at the exclusive breastfeeding and the early initiation, when we started, and then exclusive breastfeeding, you know, which means you keep on breastfeeding the child till 6 months, then you can introduce the child to what is called the complementary feeding. Complementary feeding is giving additional food together with the breast milk. So the child will keep breastfeeding till when he gets to 2 years before he can be weaned, according to the infant and young child feeding standard. And this is a standard the Federal Ministry of Health is using for Nigeria. So this is the standard, and then you can wean your child at 2 years. But you can go beyond 2 years if you want to, because babies that are well breastfed, their growth development is so different from other babies. You see them not having all these general illnesses. I'm sure the doctor would enlighten more about that. You know, all these childhood illnesses, it prevents them from having it.
Okay, Dr. Epotu, let me talk to you about the benefits of breastfeeding to the mother. And how is, you know, even this breast milk generated in the first place? If we are saying that a mother can take 6 months of her life and give her baby just breast milk, what does she need to do for herself to be able to get this done without breaking down? All the kinds of nutrients that are, you know, available within the breast milk. What does a mother, a nursing mother, need to do to make sure that, you know, she's up and going to be able to make this available?
Okay, let me take one question at a time. The mother first. Breast feeding is beneficial both to the baby, to the mother, to the family, and to the community at large. You asked specifically for the mother, so let me dwell on that. For the mother, initiating breastfeeding early, immediately after delivery or within 1 hour, first of all, it helps in that bonding with the child. And when the child suckles the breast, it causes contraction of the uterus. So it helps with the expulsion of the placenta faster and easier. Also, it helps with what we call uterine involution. You know, the uterus contracts back to its previous size before pregnancy. You hear people complain that breastfeeding makes them add weight and all of that. Well, that could happen, but if you are actively breastfeeding is one action that cuts down calories in the mother's body so much. So you have to match up with adequate nutrition, balanced meal, as in every from carbohydrates to protein to vitamins to minerals. Your meal should be balanced, and when you're able to do that, you realize that you would produce the best quality of breast milk. And also, mother, when you initiate that breastfeeding with the child, there's this bond that exists between you and the child. It gives you time to room in, what they call rooming in. You stay in with your child, you get to appreciate the child, the child gets to know you better. Also, even for the mother, women that have that breastfeed tend to have a lower prevalence of having both breast and ovarian cancer. Studies have shown that. So, and they also have less tendencies of having breast engorgement. Where breast milk is being produced, your breast becomes so full from there. So that is one aspect that is very beneficial to the mother as well as the baby. She mentioned about the baby. Yes, the constituents of breast milk contains a lot of immunoglobulins, a lot of it helps to boost the immune system of the child. You realize that children that are breastfed have a higher intelligence quotient. They do better in school. They grow better and they tend to fall ill less because their immune system is top notch. So they keep going and you don't have to keep going to the hospital. And that is how it saves costs for the family, as she had earlier said. So what can the mother do to be optimal to breastfeed? One, she has to have enough rest. And that is where family support comes in. Because breast milk production has a lot to do with the state of the mother and also frequency of breastfeeding. The more she puts the child to the breast, the more breast milk is being produced. So when you hear mothers complaining, oh, I think I'm not producing enough for the child, and that's simply, I tend to tell them, that's simply because you are not putting the child frequently enough to the breast. So at the first 6 months, feeding is on demand. They call it on demand. When the child cries, means the child needs to be fed. You put the child to the breast. You don't even have to wait for the child to cry. There are certain cues that the child will give to you that you know that the child is hungry. So when you do that, frequent feeding would cause frequent suckling of the breast by the child will cause more breast milk production because it sends necessary stimulus to the brain, telling the brain to release the hormone which is necessary for the production of breast milk. Another very important thing is, the first breast milk that comes out from the mother immediately after childbirth, that is somehow yellowish. We tend to find people within our culture, not just this culture, most people tend to discard that milk. They would say it's bad, it's not white. But that is like the first immunization the child gets. Because the colostrum, it contains a lot of immunoglobulins as well as a high level of vitamin A. So
after that milk, sorry doctor, let me just get you to explain something there. After that particular yellowish breast milk comes out, it doesn't come out ever again in the whole cycle of breastfeeding.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't come out again, but the other breast milk that comes out, which is the white one, still contains necessary immunoglobulins and nutrients, but not as high as that which is seen in the colostrum. And that is why the colostrum is very important to be given to the child and not to be discarded. Secondly, you also hear mothers complain that they think the child is thirsty. Oh, how will you keep a child for 6 months without water? What we need to recognize, if you ever try expressing breast milk, you will recognize that the first milk that comes out is somehow like clear fluid, like how you would say coconut water if you want to compare it with something. And that is like the water for the child. When the child keeps suckling, and that is why it's good to put the child to the breast for a long time, because the longer the child stays on the breast, the higher the chances of the child getting the main nutrients from the breast milk, because the first thing that comes out is more or less like clear fluid. it doesn't contain the higher amounts of protein and other nutrients that are in the milk. When the child continues suckling, you now start seeing that fluid that looks clear starts getting white, starts getting thicker. That is what will keep the child full for a longer period of time. So when mothers complain that, oh, I think this child, that my breast milk is not satisfying this child, and you ask deeper, you get to realize that she's not putting the child to the breast long enough. So the child just takes that first fluid that doesn't really contain the high protein content, and in no time the child is hungry again. And it's as if the child is putting the mother through so much stress. So we always advise, put the child frequently and put the child long enough on the breast. Let the child suckle for a long time. And most times, let the child be the one to get off the breast by themselves, by herself or himself.
Okay.
Let the child be the one to, trust me, these children have their own, they have their own, what's the right word to use now? They know when they are full. They know when they're satisfied. So they will naturally either slip off and get off the breast.
Okay, so
it could be a lot of work.
So doctor, another question I'd like to ask, this could be a myth, but that's why I'd like for you to clarify on it. Is it true that breastfeeding also works as some form of family control for women? Because you know, there's that myth that goes around that if you breastfeed your children for as long as, like Celia said this morning, 2 years, it says within the window of that 2 years, you know, some people say they will not be able to take it. Others say, oh, we have seen it fail a couple of times. What's that like from the medical perspective?
Yeah, first of all, let me clarify. It's not a myth. It's a fact. And it doesn't apply to everyone. You see, breastfeeding has been seen to be one of the natural means of contraceptive. Contraceptive simply means something that prevents pregnancy. In some people, as long as they are breastfeeding actively, I use that word actively, because there is no and they are experiencing amenorrhea, as in they haven't started seeing their period, their menses haven't started, you know, they are safe. In some women, there are some women that actually actively breastfeed, and even while actively breastfeeding, they get to see their period. So it varies in women, but you just need to understand yourself. And that is why we advise, you know, sometimes if you are the type that you are actively breastfeeding, but your menstruation has started already, we advise you to access other forms of contraceptive. Don't rely solely on breastfeeding. If you're the type that as long as the child is suckling from you, you are in a state of amenorrhea, you don't see your period, then you are 98% safe. There's a high tendency that you will not take in. So I just want to clear the fact that it may not apply to everybody, because we have actually seen it fail in some people. So it's important that women that want to use breastfeeding as a form of contraceptive should study their body system well. Once you see your first period, know that there's a high probability of you becoming pregnant, and seek for other means of contraceptive.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. Celia, let's piggyback a little bit on talking about balancing this whole breastfeeding cycle for working mothers, because it's really difficult. Sometimes women have to juggle, bring those children along, and you know it's a far cry. A lot of working mothers cannot, you know, breastfeed their children for 6 months straight without giving them any other day. What are some of the steps within the working environment that even, you know, civil society organizations and NGOs are currently pushing for employers to make sure it's part of, you know, the work life of, you know, women? And then again, are there punitive measures? Like now, the society is evolving. An average workplace really does not have a crèche for the workers, you know, for the mothers. So what's this like, you know, from your end?
Okay. Just like the theme for this year, we said enabling breastfeeding for working mothers, right? So that is a wake-up call for organizations to make available the crèches, and then or lactation room where the mother can just take out time and go breastfeed her baby and get back to work. So that's the importance, like we mentioned earlier. We said it will help the mother have better coordination at work. It will also prevent the mother from going into other options of feeding the baby, and then she'll be able to breastfeed the baby adequately. And then we find that the baby will grow so much, and then the development of the child will be excellent, you know. The child will not be having so much of these illnesses and so on. And then, you know, there's this stigma associated with women. Most times they say women, when they breastfeed too much, they will have sagging breast.
Exactly.
So it's difficult for women to even breastfeed at open places. You find women in church find it difficult to breastfeed. So they would rather get some formula, bottle feeding, you know, feeding bottles for the baby, and, you know, have different options, because they feel bringing out your breast in the public place, it's quite embarrassing and it's not really good. But I feel the woman should breastfeed at all times, even when walking.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So there's this question, there's something that just came to my mind, the fact that some women find breastfeeding very painful, especially for new mothers. Sometimes, you know, they do not learn that, you know, you have to get the entire areola into the mouth of the baby, you know, for them to be properly fed. So let's talk about the pains that women also, because it might be part of the contributing factors why they say, oh, I know the pain I go through while breastfeeding, I don't want to do that in the public place. So please educate us a little bit on the pain and, you know, ways out.
All right. Mostly for new breastfeeding mothers, because of the lack of awareness, we won't say ignorance, because they don't know. You know, positioning and attachment is one of the major challenge that most breastfeeding mothers have. You know, there are techniques in how to position your baby to have adequate milk coming out. Just like you mentioned, the areola is a black part of the nipple. It's expected that this areola will be deep inside the mouth. It goes inside the mouth of the baby. So but most times you just see it on the nipple. Babies are just trying to pull the breast, the nipple. Our lips should be wide open, you know. But sometimes you find that the lips of the baby is like inside, similar to what I'm demonstrating, inside. So when that happens, the mother will develop what is called the sore and the cracked nipple. And that's where the nipple will start having some bruises and then bleeding and so on. And it will be very difficult for the mother to breastfeed. Like the doctor mentioned earlier, she talked about the engorgement of the breast. When milk is not able to flow out, the breast will be engorged, swollen, painful, reddish, and then it gives the mother even fever, you know. So the sore and cracked nipple is also another, is when the baby is under your arm, just as the name implies. And this underarm is usually good for underweight babies or twins. If you have twins, you can breastfeed at the same time. One will be under the left arm, the other will be under the second the right arm. And then you'll be able to breastfeed them both together. And then low birth weight babies as well. And then we have the cradle. Cradle is holding the baby this way. Your palms are under the baby back buttocks. And then you're able to, and then the 4 fingers have to be under, you know. And then you express the breast. You support the baby to suck the breast. But most times mothers will come back and say, we don't have enough breast milk, like the doctor mentioned earlier. We don't have enough breast milk. The challenge is positioning and attachment. But we feel like once the baby is attached to the breast, automatically the baby will start suckling.
Are these things that are taught during antenatal sessions to pregnant women?
They do in the hospital, soon as they're pregnant. Because they'll be able to, they will take them through different health education sessions at the facility, where they will know all these techniques, because it will be demonstrated, you know. So we need to encourage them to turn out, register for antenatal care as soon as they get pregnant. And then we're also talking about one other breastfeeding difficulty that we usually say is the blocked dot, the inverted nipple. The inverted nipple is when the nipple itself, it's inside, inward. So there's no way the baby can breastfeed. So the baby will be crying, very uncomfortable because the baby is hungry and milk is not producing. So the best way to do is visit the hospital, but we teach local community women in how to use different techniques to help themselves. So you can use a 10 ml syringe, cut it off, put it on the nipple, draw out the nipple, support the baby.
That's for someone with an inverted...
is not psychologically fitted. She has issues, maybe financial issues or health concerns, or maybe...
Even the lack of family support in the process
yeah,
of
lack of support in the family, or even at work. All through the little time she has to sleep, she most empty mother.
Oh, wow. To talk about this. So Dr. Ekpo, so just to wrap up, if you were going to share something, you know, very important with regards...
In line with the theme on breastfeeding this year, I think it's important that we feed because that is the one thing that will help improve the breastfeeding indices within as well as country. We've seen states that maternity leave period. We want women to breastfeed for 6 months and we're telling them to return to work at 4 months. How do they go about that? So the policy, Akwa Ibom state government should look into the possibility of inclusive breastfeeding within the states.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kuyekemi Ekpo. So, of course, she's a consultant, public health. Appreciate you. All right, Saya, just before I let you go, in a minute, your final words, what would you really like women or the working community to know?
Okay. Policies in place that will support working mothers to have breaks at workplaces, crèches and lactation rooms in workplaces, and then breastfeeding women should be supported at
the World Breastfeeding Week. Of course, it's going on started out on the 1st of August and will be finishing on the 7th. A lot of things to talk about and how best to, you know, inform and educate, you know, a breastfeeding mother around you. This is an information that we need to spread all around the world, and Nigeria and Spectrum Television, we are giving .ng. Thank you, Celia Chef, for coming on the show this morning. Of course, she's a nutrition advisor. Ended week doing Rise and Shine with you. This is where we'll draw the curtains for this week. Definitely do this again next week. Enjoy your weekend and see you on Monday. Bye-bye.